talking about where we're at with social media today, if you want to really win at organic, build a massive audience, which you don't have to be successful. There's other ways to be successful in life. But if you want to master this medium, you need to learn how to communicate in a way that gets the masses interested in your subject matter, in your message, in your voice. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's like, if you can't figure out how to make 1 million people interested in what you have to say, and you're focused on just getting 1,000 people interested in what you have to say, then it's going to be very difficult to really break through.
All right, let's kick off. Brendan, again, thank you so much for this, man. I really appreciate it. I think you really stand out with a book about 1 million followers. So excited to get into that. Excited to get into some of your other work today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to connect with you and everybody that's tuning into this.
Yeah, of course, man. So I think, a lot of people at this point will be asking, like, why is it you do what you do? Why did you go down the path of doing this from a background in the film industry as well?
Yeah, in terms of what our company does, I would say that we really specialize in communication. And communication is gone through a massive transformation. So if we think pre-social media, in order to reach the masses, you needed to go through a television station, radio station, magazine, newspaper. So not everybody had access to the masses. It's you either had a connection, or you had to advertise, or you controlled those distribution channels. So maybe a few million people can reach the masses on a yearly basis. Today, there's 4 billion content creators on the planet. That's how many people are on social media, that literally any one of them can open up their phone, click a button, and post something. So it's completely transformed the way that we communicate, because there's so much competition. There's so much noise out there that we have to overcome, whether we're an individual or a multi-billion-dollar brand. So the fundamentals of how we express ourselves has to fundamentally change in order to overcome the noise, in order to stand out. So, with communication in our company, we really focus on understanding what goes viral, why it goes viral. And one of the key ways of understanding that is also looking at content that underperforms and understanding why it's underperforming and not reaching the masses. So that's really at a high level what we do. I mean, I started in this space in 2005. So the very earliest stages of social media, back when there was Friendster and MySpace, and got into it through the film industry. I initially wanted to produce films, but just realized I was one of 1 million people wanting to do the same thing. And I had just accumulated some knowledge in creating some internet companies while I went to college, to kind of see the potential of leveraging social and digital platforms to help promote movies in a more effective way. So I basically leveraged that knowledge to go from making coffee and copies and deliveries to forming digital divisions for movie studios.
That's mad. You could really move your experience from one industry to the next. And that's what a lot of good creators are doing, really, aren't they? Whether they're like coaches, which I know you work with, or like consultants, they can bring that into a digital space now and really perform well. So you spoke there as well about the poor content and analyzing it. What do you think are some of the biggest reasons why people fail on social media that you've seen?
I mean, there's many different reasons. I think that one of the biggest reasons is people are operating off this old paradigm is, I'm going to create a niche piece of content for a very niche audience. And social media doesn't work that way, because remember, there's 4 billion content creators on the planet. And the thing that controls reach and distribution are the algorithms. Now, the algorithms are designed to do one thing and one thing only. And no, that's not to suppress your reach on purpose to get you to pay for it, because if that was the case, nobody would ever go viral. Their goal is to keep people on the platform longer, user retention. The longer people spend on these platforms, the more ads they can serve, the more profit they generate. So essentially, they have billions of pieces of content to choose from. So they're looking for content that they can see to the widest possible audience and hold attention for as long as possible. So if you're designing content for a very specific niche audience, the algorithm's not going to waste its time trying to identify what your intent as a content creator is and interpret that intent and then try and find that audience,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to look at, well, if we seed this outside of your followers or even to your followers, does it stack up against all the other content that we have to choose from to, again, play to our business goals and objectives? So that's a huge mistake. Like in order to be a viral content creator or build a massive audience, be successful, you have to learn how to contextualize your niche, your expertise, and make it interesting to the widest possible audience. And most people will say, well, Brendan, my industry is super niche. It's not sexy. It can't go viral. That's not true. Everything can go viral. There's examples of lawyers, doctors, accountants, people that teach finance, real estate agents that go viral because of the way that they express their expertise in a way that's interesting to the widest possible audience. So your job as a content creator is to make people care at scale, which is difficult, but it is achievable. And that's where success comes from. So I would say that that's one of the biggest mistakes. And then after that, there's just executional mistakes, is like your pacing, your tonality, your first 3 seconds. Are you overwhelming the viewer? You know, all these different elements that we really track that can detract from your ability of really breaking through.
How much do you think of it is like about understanding human psychology as well? So as you said there about, you know, playing into where the narrative is or trying to get the right reaction, like what basic understanding do we need to know of like kind of human psychology of like how people react to things, how people retain the information, especially videos? I know you post a lot of videos on Instagram as well at the moment.
Listen, psychology helps. Do you have to be an expert in psychology to master this? No, it definitely helps in understanding that. I think that the biggest starting point and biggest thing you need to learn is how to become an effective storyteller. And, you know, there's storytellers that really understand the nuances of psychology and human behavior and leverage that to tell stories. And there's storytellers that don't. They're just amazing storytellers. But this medium is really all designed to, again, tell an effective story, hold that attention for as long as possible. So like an analogy that may be helpful is, I'm sure most people listening to this use Netflix, or they use a streaming service like Netflix. So think of Netflix like an algorithm. Is, you know, they invest in a show and or a movie around a specific actor or something, and they're going to release it to their audience, and they're going to measure that show's effectiveness to get people to stop and watch versus all the other content they have. And if that show does not get enough people to stop and watch most of it, if not all of it, they're not going to renew that show. Versus the content that they do, like a Stranger Things or Squid Games, where most people stop, watch the entire thing, well, they are going to then renew that show. So it's very similar to the algorithms. You know, the only difference is the algorithms aren't actually producing the content the way Netflix is, but that's how the algorithms make that decision. Is if people are not stopping and watching this content, then why are we going to distribute it to more people? So if like Netflix launches a new show on a weekend, and in the initial data, they see people aren't watching it, then why would they keep that show featured? They would replace it. Because if people keep showing up to Netflix and they're not finding content they want to watch, they're going to stop resulting to Netflix and ultimately cancel their subscription. It's the same thing with social media. Is if people keep going to social media, they're not finding content that's engaging and entertaining them, they're going to stop resulting to that platform and go to another platform, and thus they're going to lose ad revenue.
Does that work in terms of like how some accounts might get suppressed, or is every individual piece of content treated individually, like and uniquely? So do you have the same ability to grow and actually, like, you know, improve an entire page and let it continue to develop, whether it's a business or an individual, at the same rate?
How do you mean that if an account is getting suppressed?
Let's say, for instance, like if the content isn't good. So let's say if you're on Instagram or you're on Facebook and it's a B2B product, or even if it's a B2C, let's say, and a lot of their content is not being shown at the moment, it's not good quality, let's say, would that content get downgraded and then their overall page gets downgraded? And as a result, then they may not have future opportunities, thinking that Netflix's example, because it's not being shown anymore.
Yes, it definitely works that way. Now, you can recover from it, but and again, this is the biggest mistake that content creators make, is they're not seeing the performance. They keep doing the same thing over and over again, and they're expecting something to go viral. Or maybe one thing goes viral, they have no clue why it went viral, and thus they can't reproduce it.
Yeah.
But yes, they will downgrade your account, or maybe downgrade is not the right word. They're just not going to give you free wins. It's like, for example, like Mr. Beast on YouTube, he has built up so much clout and credibility because he's proven it time and time again that the reach that he'll get for a video is going to be 10,000 times the average content creator when his videos first launched.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if over time Mr. Beast stopped getting, his retention kept dipping, and his content and storytelling fell off a cliff, which is not going to happen because he really understands this stuff at a nuanced level, then yes, over time the algorithms are going to pick up on that. There's no free wins in social media, in the social media space, but as your audience grows and you prove that you are a good content creator, you get, like, going back to, again, film or television, you have a director that is well respected. Like, I'll give you an example. It's like M. Night Shyamalan, the guy that directed Signs and Sixth Sense and all of that, is like, he had a great reputation. And so, most people would give him the benefit of the doubt and go and watch his movies. But then his quality started dipping a little bit, and thus his box office started dipping, and people didn't give him the benefit of the doubt. Now it's picking back up again. So even as, a director is like, yes, you have that level of credibility and people will buy into that until you prove to them otherwise. And it's the same thing with the algorithms.
Yeah, that's funny because everyone will blame it. They'll blame the algorithm and say that it's not their fault and it's someone else's fault. But if your content's shit, it's just shit, isn't it? Like, there needs to be that internal reflection.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is we don't really kind of look at it from bad versus good. We look at it from high performing versus low performing, and what's causing the low performance. And, every message has been told. It's like, if you want to talk about meditation or mindset or taxes or psychology, whatever, or sports, everything has been covered. It's just the way that you deliver that story that dictates your success or lack thereof. Going back to movies, 99% of movies follow the same 3X structure, the exact 3X structure. Most of them follow the same hero's journey and character development. However, we've all sat down in a movie and completed it and said, that's the best movie ever, or that's the worst movie ever, using the same structure. So again, as a content creator, oftentimes it's not about the message and what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. How are you telling that story that determines whether it's successful or not? And going back to the biggest mistake of content creators, of not making it interesting to the widest possible audience, which takes skill to do, but that really is one of the biggest determining factors of performance.
Yeah, I want to dig into that as well because, I watch a lot of your podcasts, watch a lot of your kind of seminars, and what I was interesting is you were saying about going wide, like go super fucking wide, try to get the 1 million and further beyond, versus the 1,000 true fans approach. Why was it that you picked kind of that model instead? Like, why did you go super big? Like, what was the benefit to doing that, let's say?
Well, first off, the 1,000 true fans model still works today. I'm not sitting here saying it doesn't work. I started in an environment in the film industry where you were forced to think big. You could not go into a meeting talking about how you're going to reach 1,000 people, even 10,000 people, 100,000 people. You needed to make 100 million people or more around the world know about a single piece of content, because we invested tens of millions of dollars into producing this single piece of content. So that is the way that I have built or started and built my career, is under that mindset. But again, talking about where we're at with social media today, if you want to really win at organic, build a massive audience, which You don't have to be successful. There's other ways to be successful in life. But if you want to master this medium, you need to learn how to communicate in a way that gets the masses interested in your subject matter, in your message, in your voice. And that's where it's like, if you can't figure out how to make 1 million people interested in what you have to say, and you're focused on just getting 1,000 people interested in what you have to say, then it's going to be very difficult to really break through.
Because you're kind of at a narrow stage versus going kind of big and saying, pretty much having a bigger target accountable market. You're making yourself too small too quickly.
Well,
essentially,
it's more about your ability and effectiveness to make millions of people care about what you have to say.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you were, let's say, on this mission, your plan is 1 million, and that's the idea. How did you reverse engineer it? Did you start with it like, you have the goal in mind, you have a quantitative goal, but was there a way you engineered it particularly, saying this is where I want to get to, these are the steps I'm going to take, and how did you pivot?
Well, I had spent 3.5 years developing the systems that I used to do it, and I had been doing it for athletes, celebrities, journalists, and brands. So I knew all the levers to pull, the type of content to go out with, because I've analyzed so much content. I tested so much content. So it wasn't that I just woke up one day and like, hey, I'm just going to figure out if I can do this. I knew I could do it. It was a matter of why or if I should do it. And that, the reason for the why was for the book, to express not just the strategies that I learned over the years, but the other people. I think so many people don't even read the book and they think the book is just about me. It's not. Like, collectively in that book, and even collectively with our team has done about 60 billion views, 100 million followers, and $1 billion in revenue. So it's not like, oh, I just generated 1 million followers once and that's it. On top of that, the other people featured in that book, some amazing content creators like a Prince EA, Julius Dean, the founder of Jukin Media, 9gag, all of these people talk about their principles. So the why was, I know that there's a lot of information about how to be successful in social media and what social media is really about that I wanted to get out into the world, but I needed an effective hook to grab people's attention. And that's really, I knew that it could be done. And the reason that I did it was for the hook for that first book.
And I think, but when you're kind of breaking it down though, like, your actual strategy, let's say when you were consulting with some of the bigger companies, whether it's Vice and Skechers and all the big kind of names, but when you're doing it for yourself and it's like you're completely on ground zero, where did you go? Like, that's what a lot of people will be looking, is that they want to go from 0 to 1. What was the kind of first approach? Did you just test a lot of stuff through Facebook, through Instagram, through different kind of accounts?
Yeah, I think the best way to tackle this is thinking about what it takes to be successful on social media. Because even if I gave everybody that's listening to this podcast 1 million followers today, 90% of them wouldn't even be able to reach those followers because their content's not dialed in. Just because you have followers does not mean that you can reach them. Because again, you're fighting against 4 billion other content creators. And if somebody's following you, they're likely to follow 100 or 1,000 other creators out there.
Yeah.
So really, if you want to grow an audience, master social media, you have to start with content. Content is everything. It's understanding why things go viral, why things don't go viral. Starting there before you even focus on generating followers, because without that, you're never going to maximize the benefit of any followers, and you won't be able to continually grow. So to me, and it's even kind of where I started, is getting a fundamental understanding of what captures and holds attention for as long as possible to get your point across, to get people to perform the intended action that you want them to take. Because it's just like focusing on tactics is not going to yield the real results that people are looking for.
Yeah, and even like your element of a hook, like there's 101 different ways to write hooks, and some of them are better than others. Some of them feel in different opinions of others. But I suppose it's just testing that idea. And what I loved as well about some of your work as well is how you said you'd write several different pieces of content, repurpose them, and you could have it like 70 different ways. So it could be the same structure, the same format. But like by doing that, were you able to kind of find a repeatable pattern so that then therefore you could come back and write the same type of posts and the same type of videos and
Well,
the images?
the first thing is you don't want to test for the sake of testing. You need a foundation of what you're testing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need to learn where's the best place to start. Like I'll give you an example is my friend Craig Clemens, who's featured in my second book, Hook Point. He's created a company called Golden Hippo, and they've sold $2 billion worth of products off of social media ads. He's probably one of the best copywriters on the planet right now. And when he first started, he was working for another company, and every time he would submit his hooks, they would get rejected because they weren't good. So what he did was he studied the best hooks out there, the most successful ones, put them into a document and started plugging in his words, his products, his services into it to really understand how to translate what worked into successful hooks for himself. But if he just kept on the path of just coming up with hooks that were coming off the top of his head and testing those, he wouldn't have gotten to the place that he wanted. So is testing important? Yes, but you need to know what to test. And the best way to learn what to test is by studying what's working in the market, what's not working in the market, and then leverage those insights to test. That's why our entire company is a research and insights business where we have a team of analysts that are dissecting virality every single day and providing those insights to content creators so that they can learn these creative nuances. And it's the only reason that our model is so successful is because we are constantly studying what's working. I don't care what algorithm change happens, what new platform happens, what the algorithm's doing, because we always find the answers, because we can just go. If everything changed tomorrow, most people are going to be in horrible position. We're going to be in the best position because we can just start analyzing what's working and why it's working. Does that make sense? I know it's not a direct answer to your question.
No, you're dead right. You're dead right, because I think it's standing on the shoulders of the greats that gone before you, not necessarily the most famous people, but just in general, understanding it. But I think people would overlook that with their own biases and think, oh, this is going to work and this is going to be fine. But like, you should be studying what is working and your variation of it.
The blessing and the curse of social media is that we can open up our phone, click a button, and record something. So we have the power to reach 1 billion people from our pocket. The curse is because it's so easy, most people don't put any thought into it. Versus 100%. Like, for example, I went to film school, and what do you do in film? You learn from the best. You know, you watch content dissected, and at the time, and it's becoming less and less today with technology, but when I started in the film industry, it's like nobody could just make a film. Like you needed to really, work your way up the ranks or study, or if you did make a film, you had to put a lot of thought into it, because like even renting equipment, even if it was video. And even when I first started in film, they were still shooting on film. Digital production wasn't really there yet. Like you have to put a lot of thought into it before you do it. Now, does that guarantee that it's going to be good? No, but it forces you to be more strategic about the stories you're telling, how you're telling those stories.
Definitely. There's more thought into it. Whereas now it's just so, I don't know. It's supposed it's so throw away some of it. That's why there's just an abundance of content, and then the quality of it can be downgraded. When you have been studying like the best like analysts, or so when your analysts have been studying the best creators, what are some of the best findings you've came out with this? The things that have really stood out to you from the best?
Well, we talked about one is the generalist approach. That is a recurring theme across all content creators, is how can you make your subject matter interesting to the widest possible audience? So for example, there's a lawyer, Erica, I think it's Kohlberg on TikTok. She's a lawyer. She takes her expertise, makes it interesting to the general population, because she like breaks down, she reads the fine print of legal contracts and says, well, this is what happens when your flight gets delayed or flight get canceled, of how you can, get money back or things, or returns, or things that happen in a daily life. But the way that she's doing it, she's telling, a story of interacting with herself. She's on one screen, she's on another screen. I think we call it the two characters, one light bulb format. But that the concept of the generalist approach is a huge element. You may have heard of Graham Stephan, a YouTuber that teaches finance to millennials. One of his most viewed videos is how I bought a Tesla for $78. Again, his title is not how to, understand the financing of a car to maximize value. It's how I bought a Tesla for $78 to grab that attention, that generalist approach. Anybody would be interested in that.
Is that entertainment? Is that feeding into the entertainment element of it?
Well, there's entertainment in it, but it's still providing value. Like it's, and I'm not saying that value comes in many ways, shapes, or forms. So value is a very broad kind of term, but it's, a lot about what we talk about is, are you setting an expectation and delivering on that expectation? So how I bought a Tesla for $78, you're clearly setting an expectation. Now, Graham is an expert storyteller, and he's able to tell that story effectively and hold that attention and break down the things that he wants to break down. Some people may say that's entertaining. Some people may just think that there's just getting, interesting data on the way that he perceives things. But, I'll give you another example that I wouldn't say is really entertaining, but another subject matter that people wouldn't think would go viral is taxes. But there's a guy with a YouTube account called Clear Value Tax. And again, we analyze his account from his high performers versus his low performers. And his low performers make sense. It's like the Fed interest rate and what it's going to impact on businesses. That's a very, very specific audience. But where he really went viral, where he generated, I think he had like 4 videos with like 2 million views more, was all about the stimulus checks. How much the stimulus check is going to be for? Is there going to be a second one? When you're going to receive it? All over 2 million views. Now, I wouldn't say that content is entertainment. It's tapping into, again, the generalist approach of what people really cared about at the time during COVID and providing valuable information and articulating it in such a way. And it's a very boring setting. He's just sitting behind a desk. He is articulate, but for that, it's less about entertainment and more about, again, playing to the generalist approach of what people care about, making them interested in it, where most people don't care about taxes at all, where they would spend time on a social media platform consuming it. And then after that, again, it's really the nuances of how you're doing it, like your pacing, your tonality, number of edits, things like that. Like one of the biggest mistakes content creators make is overwhelming the viewer. Is like, you'll see that they'll have like captions, they'll have like a meme card, they'll have captions at the bottom, they'll be talking, they'll be moving, there'll be edits, like all these things happening at the same time. And you feel like you're getting left behind subconsciously, and thus you'll move on. Versus the best content creators, have great pacing with how they're delivering their content. They have you focus on one thing at a time. Or like tonality, is they have inflections, as they'll speed up, slow down. Like if you ever watch Gary Vee, he's amazing at it. You may think that he's super high energy all the time, but he goes up and then he comes down. He goes up and down. He has inflections with his tonality and pacing of how he's delivering his messages.
That's crazy. Yeah, you can see when you stop to think about those big names, you see it. I wanted to ask you what must be your thoughts on Andrew Tate's approach. So his approach was to like take over the internet. How did you see that unfold?
Well, I mean, in what respect? Because I think that,
I guess reach
in what respect?
So like bit of context. So his plan from January was to be like the most like viral person on the internet. 6 to 8 months later, he had achieved that. He had more searches than like Donald Trump, than Joe Biden, than any of the big like politicians. So he'd kind of conquered that from the aspect of on all the major platforms, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Reels, and whatnot. He had achieved that virality. And I wondered, like, is there anything that you kind of picked up from his type of content that hit that at the masses?
Well, first off, he was creating content well before that January goal. So
Yeah,
he
he
may
was.
have
Yeah.
said that. And listen, what he did was, and I'm not going to dive into the content, but what he achieved in terms of the mass reach is incredible. Um, people like what he has to say, people don't like what he has to say, but he was obviously successful in disseminating that. I think that, obviously he is an astute communicator in terms of understanding what grabs attention and holds attention. Like, again, if you look at his most viral content, he sets a clear expectation with what he's going to talk about. And oftentimes that expectation is very crazy of what he's
Mhm.
saying. And then because he set such a crazy expectation, you want to hear what that actually means and delivering on it. I'll draw a correlative with a completely different content creator, Mr. Beast. If you go to Mr. Beast's YouTube channel, look at his thumbnails and headlines, he sets these crazy expectations, like, buying an entire car dealership and selling it for $1, cars for $1, or tipping people at fast food restaurants a gold plated bar. And obviously, if you go and look at his thumbnail and headlines, you'll see the genius of it. He's setting a very crazy expectation, but then, because the expectation is so crazy, you want to see how is he going to possibly deliver on that, or what does that actually look like, or giving away a private island. It's the same correlative to Andrew Tate in a different way, where he's saying something super crazy, and then people want to see, even if they disagree with it, even if they hate it, they want to see how he's going to respond to that. Now, the other layer is, and to be honest, I don't know all the nuances of how he structured his affiliate thing and things like that. But one of the reasons that he was successful is he got all these other people on all these other accounts to flood the market with his clips. Now, I would assume that 99% of those clips did not prove successful, but because of the volume that they were being posted, that there was those breakout performers.
Mm.
So that was another layer. But just because, let's just say you have 1 million accounts posting about you, doesn't mean you're going to get as big as Andrew Tate. No, there's an element to the way that he communicates. And again, I'm setting aside whether you agree or disagree with him. I'm just talking about his context of how he sets this expectation by saying these crazy things, and then people stop and be like, did he just say that? Well, he did. What does he actually mean? Whether you agree
Mm.
with it or not. Another correlative to him in a different way is Howard Stern. Back when he was, and Howard Stern has evolved significantly, but he was, the original shock jock. Is he would do and say these crazy things, and then you'd want to see, well, what is next? What is he going to say next? Or what is going to happen with this bit or this sketch? So to me, at a high level, I think that that's what really, really drove it. I think that there was a little bit of timing that went along with it. I think that if he tried this 10 years ago, it probably wouldn't have worked. I think just the climate and the culture that we live in today kind of gave it more attention than it may otherwise.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's a long-winded answer to seemingly a simple question, but there's a lot of nuance in terms of what drove it.
No, of course, of course. Now, I guess interesting to see your perspective because, of course, you take like an analytical approach, and like obviously the guy's like super divisive. There's people on both sides, whatever. But it's very interesting to see. What
He's
I thought was
divisive, but
interesting
he's
from it.
intelligent.
Of
He
course,
knows what he's doing.
he knows how to market. He knows what to say. He's very astute. He knows what goes viral. But I thought it was funny how he doesn't have like an account on TikTok, but he was like one of the few people to say, "I don't give a shit if you take my content and repurpose it." Most people will say, "No, no, no, like I want protection of it, whatever." He was the opposite. He was like, "Go do it. Go do what you want with it." So I guess thought from like your perspective, like a master marketer, what's the kind of
Yeah, I mean,
insider's thoughts on it?
and then the funny thing is, then he complains because then people are taking his content out of context and editing it in the way that they want to, and then commenting on it. So, and listen, again, I haven't dove into his content in particular, so I don't know if it's a case with him, but I know a lot of other people, like Joe Rogan, for example, which I do respect what he has to say. And a lot of times he talks for 3 hours on a podcast and people will cut out something out of his 3-hour long conversation without the context and make him look like he's a horrible person saying horrible things. So it's just kind of interesting that Andrew Tate said that, everybody can take his content. He doesn't care what they do with it, but yet people are taking it, and some people are taking it out of context and calling him, a really bad person because of it.
Of course, there's two sides to it, that's just the way it is. But that's just interesting, though. I'd like to get your thoughts on it. I wanted to chat about content variations. I know you wrote about this as well, the different kind of elements of content variation. So when someone is even creating something for their business or for their solo ventures, how should they kind of structure it in terms of, let's say I want to publish it to Instagram, I want to publish it to LinkedIn. How should it repurpose it? Is there certain ways we take a certain piece like our podcast here today and be able to cut it up for different platforms and whatnot?
Yeah. So typically the way that we look at it is really design your content for one specific platform, get good at that platform. And if you want to disseminate different versions of it for different platforms, go for it, but don't expect a lot out of it, because each platform has distinct nuances. Like a lot of times, even if you think about TikTok versus Instagram Reels, on the surface, they kind of seem the same, but they're very different. The user interface is different. The user intent is different. Yeah, many people will post something on TikTok that may go viral, and then they post the exact same video on Instagram Reels and it doesn't go viral, or vice versa. And again, that's because of the nuances between the platforms. So I'm not opposed to you taking like a podcast and cutting it up into different clips and posting it on each platform. Just have a clear expectation. I would focus on one platform of really mastering and then seeing how it translates. I'm not going to say that there's not examples of certain content creators that really dialed in their format and it can cross-pollinate against TikTok, Instagram Reels, Shorts, things of that nature. It's just really rare. Typically, like, the content has to be so good for it to do that. So I think from a content strategy perspective is really getting good at one, focusing on that one, and then if you want to distribute it out. Now, let's just say you do have the time and energy to really get good at all the platforms at the same time. It's what I was talking about before, is when we're breaking down what's causing virality, what's not causing virality, we're doing it specifically for each platform and each content format on those platforms. Because again, there's these distinct nuances between each one and really what drives performance.
So like the biggest frustration people have is across Instagram and TikTok. They're saying, Reels, like one will get a lot of engagement, one will get not a lot of engagement. What are those small nuances between the two platforms you've observed?
Well, I think it's it's a few things. So let me take a step back and say the nuances that we're focused on is more on a content level, not on a platform level, but I can speak to platforms. So if you think about when you experience content on TikTok, or even the content that you experience on TikTok, it's very different than Instagram. Like, of course, yes. TikTok, a lot of it is music based. It is very well diversified. It's not just dancing anymore, but there is a type of content that TikTok was built off of. And thus, the content that they're serving is, around that. So you will get more music-based content, more dance-type content and things of that nature. Versus Instagram was not designed that way. Instagram was first a photo sharing network, like sharing photos with your friends, more about sharing content with. And some of these I'm coming up with on the fly. But TikTok, I would say TikTok's been designed to be more performance oriented, like you're performing for an audience, versus Instagram. The base level is more about sharing your life with your friends, your family, and then beyond that. So just from a psychological perspective of why people resort to those platforms dictates their mindset going into those platforms, the content they consume, and also the content that they create. But again, what we focus on is we would dive into a content format. I'm trying to think of a content format, like we've dissected approaching strangers on the street. Like that's a powerful format that takes many shapes or forms. But we would look at, okay, what are the creative nuances that make that successful on TikTok, and take that same format and determine the creative nuances that make it successful on Instagram. And sometimes it's different because, again, of the mindset of people going in to TikTok versus Instagram. And I don't have this data because I don't think they release it, but I would bet you the average retention graph for TikTok versus Instagram Reels is completely different. Now, it may only be off by a few seconds, but those few seconds mean all the difference in the world.
Definitely. That's very interesting because like it's kind of like when you do get like let's say 1 million followers or 1 million subscribers, it's like the worth of them is different on different platforms, and it looks like that on TikTok that it's very it's not a deep penetration. Well, it wasn't anyway when it was back in the dance days. Would that be still true that it's a different kind of value?
I mean, the value is dictated by other things as well. But for example, VidCon happened recently, and there was a story that one of our analysts was telling me about. I didn't read the story, but he was telling me about that most of the TikTok creators didn't have a lot of fans show up to their events, but the YouTube creators was like insane. Like there was just flooded with fans. And if you think about it, it makes sense. It's like YouTube, people are sitting with each video watching you for 8, 10, 15 minutes. TikTok, they're watching you for 30 to 60 seconds. So, the brand connection is different. Now, does that mean that TikTok is not a valuable platform? No, by no means. That it doesn't mean that. Every platform is valuable in its own way. It's just the relationship that audiences have. Like 1 million people watching something on YouTube is very different than 1 million people watching something on TikTok, because that's 1 million people that are probably spending 5 to 10 minutes watching that video versus 1 million people watching something on TikTok, 20 to 30 seconds. Is like, just imagine that the difference in the relationship that's built with the person that's featured in that video. But there's other reasons that drive value. It's like, what are brands spending money on in terms of influencer campaigns? YouTube advertising platform is, more creator friendly because it's long form and they can do interstitials versus, TikTok or Instagram Reels. You can't really insert ads into the middle of a 30-second video. So there's many different versions of it. But I mean, the best thing to do is just look at Mr. Beast and the value that he's provided or that he's generated off of his brand and all the initiative that he's doing because he centered it around YouTube.
It's interesting because like YouTube, again, they're committed to it. They see the journey over a couple of years. They stick with you. One of the last questions I want to ask you kind of on this as well is that irrespective of platform, how do you cultivate an audience base and really get people to kind of stick with you? Because even from my own perspective, 115, 120 podcasts, people do come in and out. And that's fair because they're busy with their own life. So it's about kind of cultivating like an audience that I suppose will kind of grow and expand to kind of 1,000 true fans, but overall kind of are always increasing. How do you achieve that?
How do you make people care? How do you make people care? Like for you, the perfect reference is Joe Rogan. Lex Friedman's following the same footsteps as him. The genius of both of them is they can interview somebody that you have no interest. They can take a paleontologist. They can take somebody, an astrophysicist. They can take a painter. And you may have absolutely no interest in any of those subject matters, but they can make it interesting to the widest possible audience. that is their true zone of genius. And that's any type of content creator, is how can you make the widest possible audience care about what you're talking about, whether it's through interviewing a conversation or whether it's you speaking to the camera. That is your goal in today's world. And if you don't master that, then yeah, you're going to be stuck at a certain threshold. And again, I'm not diluting the 1,000 true fans. Some people can make a living off 1,000 true fans, or maybe 100, and that's all they want to do. And that's awesome. Totally awesome. I've built businesses. I know people that built businesses that aren't on social media. It's not a requirement. All I'm just saying is if you want to master this platform and master the art of communication on these platforms, that is really the key to success.
When you're saying about, for them to care, do they care because they feel some sort of, not necessarily affiliation, but they're learning from something, or they see like Lex Friedman, let's say, like super authentic, no bullshit, same with Joe Rogan, always, straight speaker. Is there that element to it? Like, what's the elements of caring?
Is it worth my time? I follow like an amazing Instagram account is Tucker Budson. It's a woman in Michigan that created an account around her dog, but she does amazing storytelling, and she's like the one that really perfected like captions of dogs speaking. Like, I'm not really learning anything from that. It's just a pure escapism and entertainment value. But to me, it's worth my time. And I enjoy Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan for a very different reason. I don't care about certain political issues, and I don't really pay attention to certain political issues. But if Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman's talking about it, it may be worth my time because I can trust that they're going to try and do an unbiased approach to telling it, where most other news outlets are not. So there's many different reasons like for caring. I think it's more about, do I care enough that I'm going to spend the next 30 seconds to 20 minutes or beyond watching this content? Because the reality now is, with 4 billion content creators, every person consuming content is a professional consuming content, as they can tell in a split second subconsciously whether this is worth my time or not. And that's the challenge that we have to approach with creating content.
That's always going to be the challenge. It's all about, that's why sometimes podcasts work really well. You can sit down and listen to a Joe Rogan podcast and not necessarily give a shit about the topic, but like the individual, and then learn more. Brendan, I'd say a massive thank you. Where can people find your stuff and your books?
Yeah, I think that if you want to really dive more into the nuances and insights and getting better at creating content, we created a private community called Viral Trends. You can go to goviral.hookpoint.com. And every week we're breaking down a content creator, a viral video format, a brand, explaining these nuances of why it's succeeding, where it fails, and giving key takeaways there. So I think that's the best place to start. If you want to work directly with us, you can go to hookpoint.com and schedule a call with our team, or direct message me on Instagram at Brendan Kane, or even on LinkedIn. I do respond there as well.
Awesome. I'll have all those down below in the show notes as well, to give a good overview of all your work. So, Brendan, like I say, a massive thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to connect with you and everybody that was tuning into this.